Good afternoon, everyone. My name is DJ Standell. Thank you for taking the time to come listen to me talk today. I want to say a special thanks to NAMI and specifically Brenda Magsamen for this opportunity to present today. I'm not a professional public speaker, and this is my first time presenting at a conference. So on one hand, I'm nervous, but on the other hand, I'm very excited. Today, though, it is about the message I'm trying to deliver here and not about my ability as a presenter. So I'll just ask that you keep that in mind. I am going to do my best, though, to make this a good presentation. And luckily, a friend of mine sent me a YouTube video a couple months ago that was around how to give a very good start to a speech. One of the methods this gentleman suggested was to use a factoid that would shock the audience. So I'm going to try and use that method today. In my bio, I relayed that I work as a business analyst. I basically add up numbers and work in spreadsheets all day. Now, I know that many of you know that this is pretty much like being a supreme athlete or perhaps even Superman, although my daughter would say I have the most boring job in the world. Anyways, here's the shocking factoid. Earlier today, I was awarded a prestigious award, and that award is I'm the most interesting business analyst in the world. Shocking, I know. However, it's actually starting to turn quite controversial. There's a picture that has started to surface on social media that's perhaps disputing this claim. So here's that picture. So far, obviously nothing I said is true, but this picture is real. A couple of years ago, I was presenting at a conference at work, a leadership conference. I had to do a talk around business stuff, and it was recorded. So when my kids learned that I had actually done a video and it was recorded, they wanted to see it. I think they thought I was some kind of YouTube star. So anyways, I fired it up on my laptop that you see there, and then I took a photo 30 seconds in of what was happening. So my daughter is laying on the counter, my son is playing on a phone. I don't actually know what my wife is doing, not sure even what's in her hands. I thought she might be looking at the screen, but when I zoomed in, she's not even looking at the screen. So perhaps maybe I'm not that interesting. However, not to be deterred, as the world's most interesting business analyst, here's what I look like. I don't always carry an attaché case, but when I do, I'm often confused as being 007. So hopefully you're familiar with the Dosecki, world's most interesting man fellow, or this joke will have totally bombed. Anyways, all kidding aside, I'm living with mental illness. I was diagnosed with being bipolar back in 2015. And while I take my mental health very seriously, and I'm very passionate about it, I try not to take myself so seriously, especially as I get older. So one other item I'd like to mention before I dive right in here is that I have provided some contact info. If you do have a question, a comment, or feedback, I would be interested in feedback. I've left an email address at the bottom of the screen here. It's askmiaproject@gmail.com, and I've included it on all the slides as I go through this. So at some point, if you feel inclined to send something to me, please do. So every good talk should have a title. And the title of my talk today is The MIA Project Presents a Series of Fortunate Events, Episode 3, We Are All Lifeguards. So what is the MIA Project? It's my way of trying to give back. MIA is an acronym I created that stands for Mental Illness Awareness. And I hope that by delivering this talk today and sharing part of my story, it can help reduce stigma, raise awareness, and offer hope to people dealing with mental health. So this is actually the second time I've given this talk. The first time was last year at the place I work. It's a company called Enterplus Resources. During last year in the month of May, my company Enterplus made a really big push around mental health. We had NAMI come in and present, and that's where I met Brenda. And when I was in one of our managers' meeting, we were talking about ideas around what we were going to do for Mental Health Month. And I volunteered that I'd be willing to share part of my story in an effort to help raise awareness. So that's how that came about, and that was the first time I gave the talk. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to start off by showing a video to start off with. Since I'm a business analyst, I have to show some graphs and numbers and stats. So I want to show some stats around mental health, and I'm also going to give a little bit of an intro to start to share what my story looked like.
I am not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say no one will love you as you are, but I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, but we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood, I'm gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen, I make no apologies. This is me. Another round of bullets hits my skin. Well, far away, 'cause today I won't let the shame sink in. We are bursting through the barricades and reaching for the sun. We are warriors. Yeah, that's what we've become. Yeah, that's what we've become. I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, gonna send a flood, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen, I make no apologies. This is me, oh, 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 oh. This is me, oh, and I know that I deserve your love. There's nothing I'm not worth. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood, gonna drown them out. This is brave, this is proof, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me.
Written in these walls are the stories that I can't explain. I leave my heart open, but it stays right here empty for days. She told me in the morning she don't feel the same about us in her bones. It seems to me that when I die, these words will be written on my stone. And I'll be gone, gone tonight. The ground beneath my feet is open wide. The way that I've been holding on too tight, with nothing in between. The story of my life, I take her home. I drive all night to keep her warm in time. It's frozen. The story of my life, I give her hope. I spend her love until she's broke inside. The story of Written on these walls are the colors that I can't change. Leave my heart open, but it stays right here in its cage. I know that in the morning now I see us in the light upon a hill. Although I am broken, my heart is untamed still. And I'll be gone, gone tonight. The fire beneath my feet is burning bright. The way that I've been holding on so tight, with nothing in between. The story of my life, I take her home. I drive all night to keep her warm in time. It's frozen. The story of my life, I give her hope. I spend her love until she's broke inside. The story of my life. And I've been waiting for this time to come around. But baby, running after you is like chasing the clouds. The story of my life, I take her home. I drive all night to keep her warm in time. It's frozen. The story of my life, I give her hope. I spend her love until she's broke inside. The story of my life. The story of my life. The story of my life. The story of my life.
Okay, so that was how I wanted to sort of start things off. The second part of the sequence there, where I sort of introduced the beginning of my journey into mental health, thought it was kind of a cool way to open it up. I'm still waiting to receive my invite to the Oscars for that opening scroll there, the way I laid it out. Probably more likely I'll get sued by Disney and Star Wars for stealing their stuff. Anyways, we'll see how that goes. But on a serious note here, I want to talk about the statistics. So I joked about a shocking fact of myself being a business analyst, but when you actually look at the stats around mental health, and it was showing there, 1 in 5 people, American adults, dealing with mental illness. I fall in that category, so I'm one of the 20%, and that's a staggering amount when you think about it. And when I actually start to really think about that, I think about a family of, say, 5 people. Statistically speaking, one of those people will be dealing with mental illness directly, but the other 4 people in the family are impacted as well. So in that case, in my mind, it's pretty much 100% impact. So when I start thinking about it from that perspective, I think it actually becomes really, really large, the amount of people that are being impacted by this. So for the rest of this talk, what I'm going to do is focus on the shirt that I'm wearing today and what you see there in the picture. I'm going to talk about the shirt and specifically the logo and how it came to be. So the first thing about my shirt you'll notice is that it's green. The reason it's green is that the ribbon that represents mental health is green. So when I created this shirt, it showed up to my office. I think it was a Friday afternoon. It was late in the day, came in a package. I opened it up and the shirt was sitting there. It was sitting in such a way that the logo was facing me. And I thought, oh, you know what, that actually looks pretty cool. It was kind of neat because I had designed it myself. And the material seemed pretty nice too. It had a good feel to it. And I like that. And I thought, you know what, let's go try this puppy on. So I went down to the bathroom down the hall and I put the shirt on. I started looking at it and I looked at the sleeves and I said, you know, these sleeves, they have a different material. And I don't really like that. And I started looking at the way the shirt was hanging on me and I noticed that it was kind of bulging down at the sides. And I thought, that really doesn't look good. I mean, let's be honest, I'm completely ripped underneath here. So that didn't make any sense. But more importantly, I remember staring at myself in the mirror and I was thinking to myself, why am I doing this? What's the point of me going out in about 3 days from now and spilling my guts on the floor? I don't really know how I began to heal or got better and how I'm doing better now. And I can't give anyone a definitive answer. So I don't think I really have anything to offer or this is going to be helpful at all. I'm just going to spill a bunch of personal stuff that I'm just going to feel yucky by the end of it. So anyways, I'd like you guys to remember that image, because I'm going to circle back to that when I get to the end of this talk. So for the next part, what I'd like to do is share what the beginning of my mental health journey looked like. So I coined this the MIA project, which stood for Mental Illness Awareness, but MIA has a traditional meaning as well. And MIA means missing in action. And I think that's actually a really, really good way to describe what I experienced and went through, especially the first 9 months from the beginning of my psychotic episode towards getting through depression. So I want to talk about what that looked like for me, because I think it's a really good analogy, the missing in action component. So I'm going to enter into that day, May 29th, 2014. So like I said in the opening scroll, I thought I really had there were no signs previously that would have really led me to think anything like this could happen. We were in Chicago that week. We had gone to visit some friends of ours. We had flown back to Denver night of May 28th. I think we got back later in the evening on May 28th. And I went to bed that night, woke up the next morning. It's the morning of May 29th. I was feeling pretty tired. I phoned into work and said, we were out of town, got home late, not feeling pretty tired. I'm just going to take the day off and stay at home. My wife had gone out. My daughter had gone out with her, and I think my son was with me. It was just him and I think he was about 2 years old at the time. And my memory's kind of fuzzy around that day. What I didn't know then was that I'd actually started to enter into psychosis. So if you don't know what psychosis is, it's when you actually start to lose touch with reality, and what you're experiencing isn't what's really happening, but in your mind, for you, that is what's happening. And it's unbelievable how real everything that happened felt to me. So anyways, I guess I'll backtrack a bit here. What had also been happening, what I didn't realize, was that I'd actually been starting to experience mania. And looking back on it now, I'd probably been experiencing mania for a couple of months leading up to the psychotic episode that happened on May 29th, 2014. And mania can have, varying levels of degree to it. And I'd say I was kind of in call it a mediocre state of mania. I was having some pretty grandiose thoughts and thinking I could do some pretty incredible things, just being highly creative as well. Those are kind of things that mania looks like. So anyways, this was going on and it was building. And I also hadn't been sleeping all that well. I kept waking up in the middle of the night, and then my thoughts would start ruminating, thinking about all this kind of call it mania stuff. So I'd been lacking sleep too. And I think that may have been part of what contributed to ultimately the psychotic episode as well. So anyways, on that morning of May 29th, after my wife and my daughter had left, I don't remember everything perfectly that morning, but I started getting an argument with God, at least in my mind for some reason. And I have no idea why. But anyways, it just started getting stranger and stranger. And the next thing I know, I pick up my phone and I started writing an email to two of my work colleagues, someone I work for and another colleague, and they're two of my very best friends as well, actually. I started typing an email, and I can clearly remember this, and I remembered at the time I was writing it, thought this makes absolutely no sense what I'm doing, what I'm writing. I wrote some disturbing items in that email, and it was just totally out of context and made zero sense. But anyways, I clicked the send button and off it went. I'm so thankful to my two friends and colleagues at work. One of them called me immediately, got me on the phone, and then he also got my other friend on the phone who actually called for help. So in very short order, help arrived at my house. And then I was pretty much immediately taken off to the emergency room at Porter Hospital. And then when I got to the hospital, it turned into a full-blown psychotic episode. Um, and I can never describe how real everything that happened in that episode to me felt 100% completely real, even though it wasn't. And it actually took months after that to keep reminding myself that what had happened actually hadn't happened. They had to pump me full of a bunch of medication and drugs. And finally, I think I just passed out and finally went to sleep. So I remember waking up the next day. I had no idea where I was. The only thing I knew was that I was pretty sure that what had happened in the psychotic episode actually hadn't occurred in reality. So I was very happy for that. Where I was in a psychiatric unit at the Porter Hospital. And this was, for me, a completely foreign experience. I'd never experienced anything like this. No idea what's going on. No idea what's coming next. I could talk for hours about the experience of being in the psychiatric unit. I think I was there in total for 20 days. I ended up being in there 2 times. And then part of what happened there was to sort of move on. I was put into an outpatient program. The outpatient program, I sort of fumbled around in there. And one of the things looking back on it, the outpatient program was highly designed around group work and group therapy. And studies or just statistics had shown that doing stuff in groups leads to really good outcomes. However, I knew for myself that this probably wasn't going to work. I typically don't like group work. I prefer one-on-one individual situations. And I just knew intuitively that was really what I needed. But that wasn't what I was in. And hindsight's 2020. The other thing about the outpatient program, there was a psychiatrist there, and I don't remember, there was probably 20 of us or so in the outpatient program in the classroom. And then we would see the psychiatrist, I can't remember, but I think it was maybe twice a week or something like that. But we only spent about 15 minutes talking with him. And I remember the first time I had all this stuff that had happened for the months leading up to my psychotic episode, all these things to try and understand and process. And I had about 15 minutes to try and divulge this stuff. And it didn't go well at all. And I was diagnosed as being bipolar in about 15 minutes. And I still remember thinking, how's it possible to diagnose someone that quickly? But in all fairness, there's lots of us in the program. There's one psychiatrist, and they're trying to do their best to manage all these patients. So anyways, my goal was to try and return to normal life as quickly as I possibly could. I just wanted to get back to work, get back to normal life, get back to my home life, and pretend like none of this had happened. I chalked it up to being one bad day. Something odd had happened in my brain. Let's just forget about it and move on. And I thought I'll just hop back on my bike and start riding again. The problem though was my bike was actually broken. The seat was missing, the handlebars were twisted, and the brakes were no longer working. So trying to hop back on that and just start riding again, I kind of have to learn the hard way that wasn't going to work. So I did end up returning to work fairly quickly. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks after the psychotic episode, I got back to work. A couple of things I'll comment on there. First thing was I started to experience anxiety. Never had experienced an ounce of anxiety in my entire life. I'd say that might not be true. I think back to my days of being a hockey goalie, and I can remember the odd time actually throwing up before a game because I was nervous. So maybe saying I never experienced anxiety isn't quite the case. But anyways, it was at a level definitely foreign to me. I remember I'd been given some pills to take for it. I'd never taken medication in my life. I remember phoning my wife from my office saying, should I take this medication? Shouldn't I take it? I feel really weird. I think it's anxiety, but I don't think I've had anxiety, so I don't even really know what that feels like. So anyways, I remember feeling very anxious. The other thing that happened was my confidence got absolutely destroyed. I'd consider myself to be a quietly confident person, but after the psychotic episode, my confidence was just shattered. I've done lots of presentations over the years around budgets and long-range plans to executives and senior leadership. And I had to do one of those sort of when I got back. And I remember going into that meeting and I was so nervous, no confidence. And it took a long, long time to get my confidence back. after the psychotic episode. The other thing that started happening was I started experiencing depression. And depression's it's an odd thing. My mom has depression and deals with it, and I've watched it, I guess, for quite a while, and I never really understood it. And it's not that I didn't have compassion around it, but I really didn't get it, to be honest. And I didn't understand why. How come you can't just get off the couch and do things? And um, it doesn't seem that difficult. However, having experienced it now, just have a totally different level of appreciation and compassion for anyone who's going through it. It can become completely debilitating, and that's what ended up happening to me. So I'm going to try and talk a bit about depression and what it looked like. I find it really hard to try and find a good analogy to describe it to people, especially people who haven't experienced it. The best I can come up with is using the analogy of having kids. So I remember before I had kids, being at work and colleagues who had kids, I would hear them complaining about how they got no sleep and their life as a couple was over and all those kinds of things. And I'd always think to myself, yeah. You're just not doing it right. And if I decide to have kids, I'll just do it better. My wife and I decided to have kids, and it turns out a month into it, a couple weeks into it, whatever it was, 3 a.m. in the morning, standing up beside the bed, child crying, don't know how to make it stop, hands raised to the heavens, thinking, I can't handle this anymore. But that's when you really start to understand what it's like to have kids. And I don't know that before you have kids, you can ever truly appreciate that. And unfortunately, with depression, I don't know unless you've ever experienced it, I don't know that you can really appreciate what it's like. Another example try to give is a simple example is music. I love music. I have to, right? My name's DJ. I'd always be in my car, driving around, driving to work, driving wherever. I'll have music on. And a lot of times I'm rocking out to that music. When I was in the bowels of this depression, I just drove around in silence for months. I'd get in the car, I'd just shut everything off, and it was just silence. And I just remember the world feeling like it was a place just completely devoid of sound and devoid of color as well. Getting up in the morning every day and trying to get ready for work, all I wanted to do every night, I couldn't wait until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock hit, and I could just go lay in bed. I just wanted to go lay under the covers. That's all I wanted to do. And then I did not want to get up in the morning. My wife used to have to coax me for months to get out of bed and get ready for work. She'd say to me, you have to go to work. This is your job. You need to do that. And there was just nothing in the tank. And it's not even that I didn't want to do it. I just didn't care, it's so odd to just feel like you don't care. And that's the best way I can describe it. But she would have to coax me to get ready and get out the door. Then I would start my drive to work. And one of the things as well, I was on cocktail medications for this stuff. And I'd never taken any medication in my life up to that point. And all these medications, one of the major side effects when I read the bottles was drowsiness. I remember many times pulling up to stoplights on my way to work, and I would just close my eyes. Just felt so tired. I could barely keep my eyes open. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have been driving a car. Then I would get to work. So what did work look like? First thing, I would drive into the parkade, and I would sit there in the car probably for 15, 20 minutes, just sitting there trying to convince myself that I need to get out of the car and go up the elevator and go to work. But I remember many, many days doing that. Then the next thing that happened was, this is the most bizarre part of the depression to me, but in October of 2014, I started pacing at work. I've never paced in my life, but I would get up. I'm sitting in my office right now, and off to my right there is where I would pace. My office is probably 15 feet long, and I would literally walk from one side of the office to the other, and I would do that for hours. And it just kept getting worse and worse. But for some reason, all I wanted to do was, I couldn't sit down. I would just get up and walk back and forth, back and forth. And as I sit here now, I can't even fathom how I was able to do that. But I did. And actually, what I learned later on, talking with my psychiatrist, he said it's a real thing. It's called agitated depression. Then the last story I'll share around depression and what it looked like for me. At our office here, we have a quiet room, and I'd never used this quiet room, and it's over by our coffee station. And with all this pacing I was doing, finally one day I just got tired of it, and so I need a break from pacing around. So I went out to check out this quiet room. Problem was it's near the coffee station, which could be a high traffic area. And then there was also a colleague who, he's probably about 7 feet tall. And when you walk to the quiet room, you stare into his office. And if he decides to just basically raise his head up a bit, it's easy for him to see you. And there's no way in the world I'd want anyone at work here to see me going into that room. So it wasn't too bad getting in there because I could see what was going on. But whenever I left the room, it was kind of a perilous journey because I'd have no idea who would be sitting on the other side of the door when I came out. Then inside that room, basically there was just a couch in there. And sometimes I would lay on that couch, and I can remember a couple of times laying on that couch, literally with tears running down the side of my face, just wondering how the hell is it possible that 17 years into my work career, I've probably averaged 9-10 hours a day cranking stuff out nonstop. Concentration, focus never being an ounce of an issue at all. And here I lay completely incapacitated 50 feet from my office, unable to do my job. And I don't share this story with you so you'll feel sorry for me. I share it so you can try to understand how debilitating depression can become. So finally I got to the point where I just couldn't work, and luckily my friend and my boss, the decision was made to put me on a leave of absence. So I ended up leaving work, I think it was February 2015. So the plan was I just needed to take time off and just heal and get better before trying to work. And I'm so thankful to Enterplus, to my colleague and my leader who made this all happen for me. They were so supportive, and I'm so incredibly blessed and grateful that I work for a company and people who were like that. So after I left work, things got better, and they got better really quickly, and the depression, it just started to lift. And I don't know exactly why or how. I know I had a ton of support from my family, from my friends, from professionals, and I spent a lot of time internally, in reflection, in prayer. A lot of this, I think, was partly a spiritual journey for me too, and working through things on that side too. One of the things, a friend of mine strongly recommended that I see a therapist, and I thought, well, how's this going to work? I barely talk about any of my feelings with my family. How's sitting down with some dude talking about my feelings going to help? But I think reflecting on that, I think it was incredibly helpful. And I think one of the things it did was took pressure off, I think especially my wife and myself. I'd unload a lot of the stuff on her, but actually going to see someone where they were really just there to listen, and I could talk and vent and speak. I wasn't unloading all of this on my wife, so I felt better about that because I felt like I wasn't burdening her as much. So I think that was actually really, really helpful. And like I said in the opening scroll, I've spent the last 5 years trying to figure out what's happened, and I've probably spent a lot of my life trying to figure it out. What I'm starting to learn is that I'm not really interested anymore in why this happened, but I'm more interested in the opportunities that it presents and the ways I can learn and grow from it. And I think that's much more important for me now than trying to understand necessarily why it happened. And I also said in the opening scroll that it's brought me closer to peace. I'm actually grateful that I had that experience. I spent a lot of time thinking about existential questions, purpose, and why are we here, and those kind of things. That all came up after going through the psychotic episode. The other thing that happened that I think is pretty interesting is that in the events leading up to the psychotic episode and in the psychotic episode itself, my deepest, darkest fears manifested in one way or another. And I made a choice to go in and, essentially face them and work through them. And so that's why I say come out the other end being in a much better place in terms of being at peace with myself. So then in July of 2015, I returned to work, sat down, started doing my job again. And it's been, I think, 6.5 years, something like that since then now. And not once have I had the urge to stand up beside my chair here and start pacing around. So I'm just so grateful that that's what it's looked like for me now. So that's what describes the 9-month period of my life where I would coin it that I was missing in action. Now I want to move on to the lifeguard emblem. So why do I have a lifeguard emblem on my shirt? I'm going to tell the California story, our trip to California. We had a babysitter that our kids both loved, and when she graduated and found a job, it was in California, so she moved to California. We've been debating about trying to maybe go out there at some point and see her. So we made a decision to go do that. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing. And we were planning it kind of last minute. We had gotten a flight, and the flight was to leave on a Friday, early on a Friday morning. And during the week leading up to that, I think on the Tuesday, my son ended up getting sick, flu or food poisoning or something on the Tuesday. He was better by the Thursday. Thursday night, though, after we got the kids to bed, came back to our bedroom. Turns out my wife is now getting sick and she's feeling pretty awful. So we weren't sure exactly what we were going to do, whether we should go or not. Said, well, figure it out in the morning. We get up at 5:30. Alarm goes off at 5:30. I hear some ruckus down the hall in the bathroom. Go down there, and sure enough, my daughter's now sick as well. So my wife and my daughter are sick, and it's 5:30 in the morning. Hadn't been sleeping a lot because everyone's been sick. Started thinking, well, what should we do? So my wife and I decided that my son and I will go that Friday, and then hopefully they feel better by Saturday, and then they'll join us on Saturday. So anyways, I go to tell my son the good news. I knew exactly how he was going to react. Told him that it'd be great Father-Son Day, and he just started crying. The reason he's crying is because Mom's not going to be on an airplane with us that day. So anyways, my son and I make our way to the airport, and we're sitting at the airport having breakfast. And we've been watching the weather a bit, and it didn't look like it was going to be that great that weekend we were going. But then when I pulled up at the airport, it was showing all these red things on the phone and flash flood warnings right where we're staying. I started thinking, well, I don't know anything about California really. And I don't know if this flash flood stuff is problematic or not, or we should really worry about that. So I phoned my wife and we started talking about it, and we started saying, why are we doing this? It sure seems like we're probably, there's all kinds of signs we shouldn't be doing this. And I think it was my wife who said, you know what, just phone your friend, Ed. My friend Ed is probably the most indecisive person on planet Earth. And, my wife and I were both extremely tired, and it's just, you know what, just phone a friend. So I give Ed a call, tell him our story. He asked me about 2 questions, and 30 seconds later, he says, you need to go. Just trust me, you need to go. I says, okay, phone my wife back, say Ed says we need to go. We start debating again, saying, well, I don't know if we should really go. 15 seconds later, my phone rings again. It's Ed again. He says, yeah, you know what, I've really been thinking about it, and just absolutely trust me, you really, really need to go. So anyways, the reason I share this little bit is that, in that situation, normally my wife and I don't need someone to tell us whether we should board a plane or not. But being that, everyone had gotten sick and we're lacking sleep and we're just tired, it was nice to just reach out and phone a friend, and especially my friend Ed. I knew he's going to give us an opinion of what we should do, which is what we wanted at that point in time. And to tie that into mental health, I'll phone my friend Ed in a situation like that. But, if I'm in the middle of feeling depressed or anxious or don't feel quite right, or, am I going to be willing to reach out to a friend and ask for help when it comes to mental health? And I think in a lot of cases, the answer is no, but I think we need to change that and be willing to reach out. So anyways, we board the plane, my son and I, we get to California. And it was just the 2 of us, and I said, what do you want to do today? And he said, I want to go to the beach and I want to throw the football. So we got to the beach, I think at 10:30 in the morning. The little place we were staying at wasn't going to be ready till I think 4:30, and we stayed on that beach from 10:30 to 4:30, and all I did was throw long bombs all day long. Let me take one break for lunch for about half an hour, and that was it. Um, but I remember that day. It was a really cool day, and um, I remember just how much I appreciated that day. I actually took time to take in the beautiful blue sky, the beautiful blue water, the sand, spending the day with my son, just throwing a football back and forth. And I'm not very good at being in the present. I'm always thinking about the future or reflecting on the past and thinking I got to do this and that and yada, yada, yada. But I tried to take time that day just to appreciate where I was and to be grateful that I was able to experience joy and the happiness of being there. And I think back to when I was depressed, there was no way I could have ever had that experience or those feelings being in the middle of depression. It's kind of like that saying, you don't know what you have until it's gone. But I was just so grateful to be able to appreciate that time and truly appreciate it. And it made me think of life being like football. Every day we, as humans, we wake up, we probably have a play drawn up, and then we take the snap, the ball gets hiked. Sometimes the play goes just like we drew it up, and sometimes it doesn't. I didn't drop a psychotic episode on May 29th, 2014. That's what happened. And sometimes that's the way life goes, and you just got to find a way to get back up and get back out there and take the next snap. So anyways, next day, my wife and my daughter arrived. My daughter had really wanted to get a lifeguard shirt. Not sure why, but she was just really fixated on that. We end up going to one of the shops in Newport Beach where we were, and they've got all kinds of lifeguard stuff. And my daughter starts looking at it. And so I jokingly said to my wife, I said, you know what, I should get a lifeguard shirt. She just started bursting out laughing. And the reason she was laughing is because the concept of a lifeguard in the traditional sense of helping people out in the water makes zero sense to me. I'm absolutely terrified of water. The only reason I go into water is because I'm trying to impress my wife. So when I first started dating my wife, we used to go water skiing once in a while. And the little lake we'd go to, I remember the very first time I went, I remember her dad pulling me in that tube. And I remember the first time going into the water, and it was the most terrifying experience of my life. Can't swim. Of course, obviously I've got a life jacket on, but I remember hyperventilating, and it was just the scariest thing ever for me. It's probably pretty entertaining for her dad looking back as a father-in-law. Anyways, being a lifeguard doesn't make any sense for me in terms of the traditional sense, because I can't jump in the water and save someone because I can't swim myself. And so tying that into mental illness or mental health, I think a lot of people, including myself, would feel that I can't be a lifeguard because I'm not an expert, not a professional. I don't know that much about this. But I think that's where we can all come in and we can all be lifeguards. If I think about being a lifeguard in the traditional sense, if I'm sitting at the pool, I can still, if I choose, watch what's going on around the pool. If I see someone in trouble, I can go get the real lifeguard and get them to step in. And I think in terms of mental health, some of the things we can do there is, first off, assess yourself and be honest with yourself. If you're not feeling that great, you feel a bit of anxiety, a bit of depression, or a lot of depression, anxiety, whatever it is, just be honest with yourself and recognize that that's happening. I think the first step is just realizing that's happening. Or if someone maybe asks you or points it out to you, I guess be willing to maybe reflect on that and see if you think that's what's going on. Another thing I'd say is don't minimize things that are happening to you. I'll use the example of a loved one passing. Everyone's going to handle a situation like that differently. It impacts everyone differently, and everyone's going to process it differently. There's no right or wrong way. It's just different for everyone. So you need to give yourself time and space for that. And if you're really struggling, reach out. It's okay to ask for help. 20% of us are living with mental illness. So you're far, far from alone. And it's okay to reach out and ask for help. Phone a family member, talk to a friend, talk to a coworker, talk to your doctor. talk to a therapist. If you're lucky enough that your work has stuff around mental health, like my work does, we have a contact line here. If your work has a contact line, access it. If you feel like it's life-threatening, call 911, go to the emergency room. And that's what I'd say when you're thinking about yourself. If you're in a good space, put on your lifeguard jersey for those around you. Check in on your family, friends, colleagues. Ask how they're doing, and just be genuine about it. You don't have to be nosy, but just show people you care. I think it makes a difference. And we need to end the stigma that exists around mental illness and treat it like physical illness. My daughter, she was in gymnastics for a while, and I think early last year, she fell in practice and she dislocated her elbow and fractured it. And when that happened, I wasn't there, but my wife was there. So she went down to the floor. Then immediately, one of the other parents came down who was a doctor. He MacGyvered a splint out of random things sitting around the gymnastics facility, put a splint on her arm. Another parent, his wife, works in the emergency room as a doctor. He called her, basically got us shortlisted to, when we got to the emergency room, to get in right away. But it was amazing how lifeguards showed up all over the place. So anyways, I think we need to get mental illness so it's looking like that too. And my final thought around the California story and being a lifeguard is being a lifeguard for myself. When I was in California, I was starting to think about the presentation I was going to give last year, and I was starting to feel some anxiety and stress around that. I started waking up in the night again, thinking about all this stuff, wasn't sleeping great. And I actually got kind of worried that, these are the things that sort of got me to a place where this psychotic episode had happened 5 years ago. And I started to get scared. So, I let my wife know right away, got back to Denver, called my psychiatrist right away, called my family doctor, talked to my friends and colleagues here at work who I was sort of bouncing ideas off. They said, you don't have to do this. So I just put it on the side for a couple of weeks and just got things back in order, and just watch out for myself with the support of others from around me. So that's my California story. Moving on to the next portion of my emblem here, you'll see the word love. Why do I have the word love on here? Well, I think love is the most powerful force in the universe. I really do believe that. I also think that the opposite of love is fear. And it's just my view, but I think perhaps some of the reason stigma exists around mental illness is because in behind it, I think potentially there's a lot of fear. It's a scary place. It's stuff we don't, I think, necessarily know how it works exactly. How do we treat it? How do people get better? When you end up with severe depression, you don't know if it's going to get better or not. And it's a scary place. So I think there's a lot of fear around it. At least that's how it feels for me. And I was struggling how to sort of articulate my thoughts around this notion of love and why I think it's important. And one of my best friends at work came in, and we're two dudes who sit around talking about love all day. Kidding, of course. But anyways, I trust him enough that I was, talking to him about it and saying, don't really know how to articulate this or really express it. And he told me about an article or a story he'd read where someone was talking about the word love and said we associate love as being a feeling, but in actuality, what love really is it's an action. It's when you take your child to the doctor because they're feeling sick. You stay beside someone's bedside because they're feeling sick. You pick up the phone and make a call to someone you haven't talked to in a while to see how they're doing. So it's more of an action versus a feeling. And I really liked that. It really resonated for me, because when I think of fear, for me, it's paralysis and inaction and doing nothing. And I know when I feel fear, that's what I gravitate towards. So this idea of love being more of an action, I really like that. And it's there to remind me to move towards action when it's coming from a place of love versus being in paralysis, which is coming from a place of fear. The last word I have on the emblem is the word hope. And for me, hope is an incredibly important ingredient that goes into my mental health journey. So I don't watch a ton of TV. I used to watch Jimmy Fallon quite a bit when I'd go to bed at night because he'd make me laugh. One night he had Michelle Obama on there, and she was talking about work she's doing with kids. And one thing she said to Jimmy, she said, "Jimmy, if we don't have hope, what do we have?" And I think that's really powerful. I think that's really true. And one thing I can say for myself is the one thing I never lacked was hope. It was always there for whatever reason. And I don't know exactly where it came from all the time, but something deep inside me just knew that one way or another, this was all going to be okay. And at some point I would get through it and come out the other side. And I always just knew that deep inside. I also remember being in the psychiatric unit. A young fellow came in and presented. I think it may have been a NAMI in our own voice presentation. I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, he shared his story. He was living with schizophrenia and he was doing really well. And it was just, I remember sitting there thinking, I'm gonna be like that guy. And one day I'm gonna stand up and I'm gonna share a success story around this. And at that point in time, I was a million miles away from where I am today and being able to share a success story. I hadn't even begun my journey, but in that moment, I remember being 100% committed that I'm going to tell a positive success story at the end of this. And I also remember many hours pacing in this office, thinking one day I'm going to stand up on the 21st floor, which is directly one floor below me, and I'm going to tell a positive success story around this. And then that's what happened last year. That was 5 years from the point of my psychotic episode, but it did happen. And I think a lot of that was just driven by hope that I was going to get there one day. And I wasn't going to give up no matter what I had to do. I think I was prepared to move heaven and earth to get out of that. Okay, so that ends my portion talking about the shirt. So I'm going to start to bring this to a close now. So I'd like you to remember back to that image I gave you of myself standing in the mirror that day, wondering whether doing this talk last year, doing at my work was really going to matter or not. So I'm going to play one last song and I'm going to share some video and some perspective that I've gained since I decided to share my story last year.
Fell by the wayside like everyone else. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, but I was just kidding myself. Our every moment I started a place, 'cause now that they're gone, I hear the words that I needed to say. When you hurt under the surface, like troubled water running cold. Well, time can heal, but this won't. So, before you go, was there something I could have said to make your heart beat better? If only I'd have known you were the storm to weather. So, before you go, was there something I could have said to make it all stop hurting? It kills me how your mind can make you feel so worthless. So, before you go, was never the right time, whenever you called. Went little by little by little until there was nothing at all. Our every moment I started to play, but all I could think about is seeing that look on your face. When you hurt under the surface, like troubled water running cold. Well, time can heal, but this won't. So, before you go, was there something I could have said to make your heart beat better? If only I'd have known you were the storm to weather. So, before say to make it all stop hurting. It kills me how your mind can make you feel so worthless. So before you go, we'll be better off by now. If I let my walls come down, maybe I guess we'll never know. You know, you know. Before you go, was there something I could have said to make your heart beat better? If only I'd have known you were the storm to weather. So before you go, was there something I could have said to make it all stop hurting? It kills me how your mind can make you feel so worthless. So before you go,
Okay, so now I'm gonna, this will be the last slide. I wanna leave with some takeaways that I'd like to leave you guys as the audience with as you leave here today. So the first one is to be a mental health lifeguard in whatever way feels appropriate for you. So for myself, what I've learned is that by sharing and using my voice, it's been far more impactful than I imagined it could be. Well, I wish I could wave a magic wand and just make mental illness disappear off the face of the earth. I don't have the ability to do that. But I can use my voice and I can share my experience. And if that can be helpful, then I'm more than happy to do that. Second item, really want people to remember is that you're not alone and it's okay to ask for help. So you've seen the statistics I showed today. You're far, far from alone. One thing I clearly remember when I came back to work the first time after the 3 or 4 weeks I was out, I remember walking down the hall just outside the store, and I had a thought that I am a 100% broken, completely defective human being, and the other 99 people who work in this office are quote unquote normal. And I honestly believe that, and that I was the only one. And what my experience has taught me especially since I started sharing this and talking to people, every time I talk to someone, I always hear back that either they've dealt with something themselves, someone in their family's dealing with something, or a friend or someone close to them is dealing with it. So it was just so far from the truth that I thought I was this person dealing with this all by myself. And it's only me. It's just not true. So you're not alone. And then the last item I'll ask you to think about as you leave is not to minimize your story. I think I minimized mine a lot. I remember being in the psychiatric unit, hearing the stories of the people there, and I just thought, wow, what I'm going through is a cakewalk compared to what other people are having to deal with in this stuff. When I heard Brenda tell her story at Enterplus when NAMI presented last year, again, I thought, wow, my story just pales, and there's no point talking about it or sharing it. But what I've learned is that your story matters to you, and you know if it's impacting your life enough that you want to take action and do something about that. So don't minimize it based on what you hear about other people's stories, I guess is what I'd say. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for listening, and I really appreciate you investing your time listening to my story today. Thank you.